Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the NCS Application Deep Dive. I'm Jen McHenry, and I am a research scientist with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in the Bureau of Climate Change and Clean Energy. The purpose of this webinar is to provide a detailed walkthrough of the NCS Round 2 grant application process, including the elements of a complete project proposal, proposal templates, and the GIS-based application support tool. We will conclude this webinar with a brief Q&A. We will add responses to all the questions posed, including those not addressed during the Q&A portion, due to available time or complexity, to the FAQ section of our NCS website, along with all the application materials, including the notice of funding opportunity, an announcement which provides all information and guidance necessary for a successful NCS grant application. Before we dive into the presentation, just a little bit of housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded, and by being here, you do agree to be recorded. This meeting will be available on our website. If you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A chat. Responses to questions posed will be published in the FAQ section of the NCS website, and we will also try to address as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. This is the third and final webinar of this series. Today, we will discuss applicant eligibility and project partners, proposal requirements, the submission process, including blue carbon and green carbon specific requirements, the new template, and the NCS application support tool for generating maps and other materials. We will also review the evaluation process, including the scoring criteria. And we will conclude this session with a brief Q&A. To provide support for all applicants, we will be holding office hours during the times listed on the screen. To schedule a one-on-one with DEP staff during these times, please email us at njclimate@dep.nj.gov. Office hours are intended to provide early guidance to prospective applicants. Grant program staff can offer broad advice to encourage applicants to align their projects with the NCS grant mission and requirements. However, staff are not expected to provide technical reviews or serve as editors of a grant proposal. Applicants can expect to get answers to specific questions about the grant's requirements and submission process. Applicants can discuss their specific project ideas to determine if it aligns with the grant's goals and requirements. As a disclaimer, any feedback or advice offered during the DEP's office hours is for informational purposes only and does not constitute a guarantee of funding or a commitment to support your proposal. Grant program staff can answer questions and provide broad feedback on concepts, but they are not the sole discretion makers in the grant review and selection process. Final funding decisions will depend on the factors laid out in the NOFA, the quality of the application, and the availability of funds. Information shared during NCS office hours reflect current guidelines and priorities. However, these may be subject to change. Please refer to the official notice of funding opportunity announcement for all relevant information. Anthony?
Thanks, Jen, and good morning to all those in attendance today or watching the recording. I'm Anthony Bavacqua, the Chief of the Bureau of Climate Change and Clean Energy. The Natural Climate Solutions Grant Program is designed to support the implementation of on-the-ground projects that bolster New Jersey's natural carbon sinks while simultaneously adding value through co-benefits targeting environmental quality, ecosystem services, and local communities. Applicants are responsible for carrying out the work outlined in the proposal. If selected, the applicant or grantee will enter into a grant agreement with the department. While the application may include one or more partners to assist with specific tasks or funding, only the applicant will receive and execute the grant. The grantee is accountable for ensuring all proposed work is completed as specified and all grant agreement requirements are met. The department will award grant funds solely to the grantee, who is then responsible for reimbursing any partners or subcontractors for documented and completed work. Applicants eligible to apply for this funding include state, county, and local governments within New Jersey, including agencies and school boards, New Jersey universities and colleges, interstate agencies, of which New Jersey is a member, private landowners that provide at least 25% matching funds, and nonprofit organizations recognized as a 501c3 operating in New Jersey. Eligible applicants must demonstrate sufficient staffing capability, expertise, and experience required to perform the proposed project directly or through contracting services. The ability to establish and maintain partnerships to ensure project implementation, as well as long-term operation, maintenance, and management, ability to secure necessary permits, provide designs in their application package or included in the scope of the proposed work, demonstrated authority, access, and/or property rights needed to implement the proposed project throughout the project lifetime. Also noting the department may require a deed of conservation restriction or memorandum of understanding for the portion of the property undergoing funded improvements or construction. Please review the requirements for projects selected for funding section of the NOFA for full details. The department encourages applicants to work in partnership to develop high quality and impactful grant proposals. Project partners listed on the applicant's proposal should be entities that have agreed to provide some form of measurable support to the project. This includes, but is not limited to, providing services, supplies, funds, paid and/or volunteer labor. However, only the single applicant entity of a proposed project will be considered the grantee, as mentioned earlier. Partners that are listed on the application will be treated as subcontractors by the department during the grant agreement and execution process. Applicants that include project partners and subcontractors on their application are not required to provide the department with documentation of a competitive procurement or selection process. However, the expectation is that, oh, excuse me, I lost my place. However, the expectation is that the grantee selected their partners and subcontractors through their own competitive process. For example, 3 quotes or a fair and competitive bidding process for complex tasks is required. Applicants are required to provide information regarding the project partner or partners in the proposal materials, including name, address, point of contact, role, and estimated value and scope of services to be provided. Thanks, Jen. For this grant program, project proposals must adhere to the common proposal requirements and project type specific requirements described later in this presentation. Understanding that the different project types will present unique conditions, each eligible project type has specific requirements meant to ensure well-planned, executed, and maintained projects. Applicants must provide this information in NJDEP's SAGE grant portal. Common proposal requirements include information on the organization, such as name, address, and organization type, vendor ID, which is the number obtained through the Department of Treasury's NJ START e-procurement system, a contact person, fiscal officer, and project manager, information on partners and subcontractors, if applicable, project details, including the type as defined by this program, title or name of project, estimated project duration, grant amount being requested, and any amount of matching funds, if applicable. The applicant must also provide details about the project location, including the address, overburden community designation, and brief description of the local geography and land ownership. As applicable by project type, applicants must provide information on the measurable outcomes of the project that show how the NCS funding will lead to beneficial outcomes. This includes acres of reforested land, number of trees planted, miles of living shoreline installed, number of acres of tidal wetland vegetation added, and other metrics identified by the applicant. Additional common proposal elements include a proposal narrative that describes the project scope and anticipated benefits, application team and partner roles, community and ecosystem services co-benefits, and an overview of the budget and project schedule. A detailed project timeline organized by appropriate phases, discrete tasks and duration, and responsible parties. The timeline and schedule should include sufficient time for all required paperwork and legal review, administrative startup, monitoring, permit acquisition if needed, project completion and evaluation outcomes, and preparation and submission of the final report. Also, a project budget that itemizes personnel, subcontractors, consultants, supplies and equipment, travel, and if applicable, volunteer in-kind and cash match. A draft monitoring plan that describes the adaptive management and monitoring measures. Applicants must describe evaluation techniques and targets, as well as the rationale why they chose the approaches and why they are appropriate measures of success. A maintenance plan that describes the timing and tasks that will be performed to ensure the continuing functionality of the project following its completion. Grantees must submit a final approved maintenance plan within 18 months of the start of the work period. For forest restoration projects, the maintenance plan must be approved by the NCS grant program before restoration, construction, or planting work can begin. A site map and co-benefit report from the NCS application support tool, which we'll demonstrate later in this presentation, as well as a detailed project plans and design documents, a letter of resource commitment, and letters demonstrating proof of authority, access, and/or property rights to be implemented to implement the proposed project. The applicant is solely responsible for obtaining all necessary permits. And finally, site photos of the project location that reflect the pre-construction conditions. Thank you, Jen. General planting requirements. All species utilized in selected projects must be native to New Jersey. Projects characterized as urban forestry canopy are exempt from this requirement. The department recommends using reference sites when selecting plant materials for a planting plan. Reference sites illustrate natural local conditions at locations similar to or in the vicinity of the proposed project site and reflect plant material that are likely to survive. If a reference site is dominated by an invasive species, such as Phragmites, the applicant should instead review historical aerial imagery or photography to determine the original flora of the area. Non-native species and species that are listed as rare or endangered will not be accepted. The department will also not accept cultivar material of native woody and herbaceous species, reducing reinvasion. Thanks. And the next slide. Design documents. So proposals must include design documents which illustrate restoration, planting, and plant protection plans. Detailed preparation plans should outline the applicant's approach to vegetation control, compacted soils, and erosion control. Project preparation plans should include a map with the extent of and orientation of the treatment area, a description of efforts to be undertaken, and be referenced in the budget where appropriate. Project preparation actions can include vegetation control of non-native invasive species, mechanical control, vegetation exclusion, including common weeds, prescribed burns, for example, in green carbon project categories, herbicide control, decompacting of soils in blue carbon, as well as erosion control in blue carbon projects. With that, I'll hand it back over to Jen as we dive into the blue carbon specifics. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, so blue carbon projects applicable to this program include living shoreline projects that address the loss of vegetated shorelines by focusing on protecting against the erosion of carbon-rich soils in tidal wetlands, restoring tidal flows in tidal wetlands. These projects will focus on increasing salinity to decrease methane production and may also target increased sedimentation and vegetation cover and tidal salt marsh vegetation restoration. These projects will increase the cover of native salt marsh vegetation. This section of the project proposal must include, so this is the restoration plan, must include all efforts to prepare the site for restoration, the placement of any and all materials except for vegetation, and any activities to develop the appropriate ecological conditions for successful vegetation growth and persistence, such as sediment placement, hydrologic alteration, regrading, site design plans and work should address the following as appropriate to meet project goals. This includes sediment and soil erosion with an erosion control plan, including biologs, shell or oyster reefs, um, or other types of applications. Poor soil conditions such as infill materials, trash and marine debris, soil toxicity and soil compaction, poor hydrology with ways to improve hydrologic conditions on site, the use of beneficial dredge material and thin layer placement strategies to restore ideal elevation, soil sediment accretion and the proposed strategy, lack of salt marsh vegetation greater than 30% requires replanting for recruitment, proper gradual slope grade for low-high marsh zones, including living shoreline stabilization, positive drainage for tidal marshes, native salt marsh vegetation recruitment strategy for restoring tidal flow projects if planting is not required, and or effective use of nature-based solutions to sequester carbon dioxide while restoring coastal tidal marsh habitat and function. Site preparation should be an element of the restoration plan and can include mechanical and herbicide vegetation control activities as follows. For vegetation control, sites with dominant invasive species covered by common reed or Phragmites, which may outcompete or interfere with planting, should be addressed mechanically with herbicides and or other proper methods of disposal. If a tidal reconnection project does not include a subsequent planting effort, project plans must demonstrate that the proposed tidal flow enhancements will control common reed dominant sites without the immediate necessity to plant native salt marsh vegetation, will facilitate natural recruitment and regeneration, and support the correct hydrology regime and appropriate salinity levels over time. If natural recruitment of native species is not feasible or is unattainable due to site constraints after tidal flow restoration, the applicant needs to include and adhere to a planting plan for the project site. For mechanical treatments, plans should describe the type of equipment, techniques, or procedures to be followed and the timing of treatment to achieve the best results. Herbicide control plans must include acceptable chemical treatment references for containment and management or control of target species, evaluation and interpretation of herbicide risks associated with the selected treatments, and acceptable dates or plant growth stage at application to optimize control. The planting plan should include details about each category of vegetation to be reestablished, the species' common and scientific names, and the quantity and size of each species. For salt marsh and living shoreline plantings, planting should be done in rows utilizing an on-center approach or in clusters as determined based on landscape position. Individual plants or clusters should be spaced approximately 12 to 18 inches apart. For upland fringe planting, containerized trees should be spaced 3 to 5 feet apart, and bare root tree seedlings should be spaced 2 to 4 feet apart. Choose appropriate planting times and handling methods to increase rates of survival. Typically, salt marsh planting should be installed after any potential for frost has passed and before early summer when temperatures rise and heat stress can negatively affect younger plants not yet well established. If native species of trees are part of the planting palette, the most opportune time frame is from the spring to late fall. When designing your planting plan, remember to target 85% plant survivorship rate. Note for this round of the NCS program, NJDEP is not requiring this as a condition for the final grant payment. Newly planted areas of marshes can be susceptible to herbivory or disturbance from wildlife, pests, fire, and erosion. Protect from pests as necessary by applying integrated pest management techniques for pest prevention, avoidance, monitoring, and suppression. All plantings that have a risk of vegetation browse shall require protection, which may include an herbivory exclusion fence or a geese fence to protect the planting area. In addition, if native tree containerized seedlings are part of the planting towards the high marsh zone, a deer exclosure fence is required. Applicants for blue carbon projects are required to submit baseline data to evaluate carbon sequestration impacts of the project. Tidal wetlands and submerged aquatic vegetation sequester carbon as organic matter in the soil. Much of the carbon remains sequestered because saturated conditions slow down microbial rates of the decomposition of organic matter. Many factors influence the rate of accumulation and how effectively carbon is sequestered. Projects will need to demonstrate that they have been planned with sea level rise in mind. The NCS grant program is focused on changes in salinity, changes in plant cover, and changes in erosion. Applicants are required to submit the following information. All projects are required to submit a map of the project site that shows the marsh retreat, and then the details listed here and on the next slide for your specific project type. So for living shoreline, salinity, length of shoreline to be restored or protected, the historic rate of erosion, acres of marsh lost per year, etc. All projects will be evaluated based on standard net carbon sequestration rates and densities unless site-specific field-collected data is provided. If carbon densities, sequestration rates, or methane emissions have been measured at the site, please provide this data. So again, the project-specific requirements are listed here for living shorelines and restoring tidal flows. And for this next one, we've got the site-specific requirements for tidal, salt marsh, vegetation restoration. And all of this information can be found in the NOFA. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Doug.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, my name is Doug Benton. I'm a research scientist in New Jersey DEP's Bureau of Climate Change and Clean Energy, and I'm going to be reviewing the project requirements for the green carbon project types. So NCS Round 2 Grant Program Green Carbon refers to projects that propose to increase carbon sequestration through forests and trees. Forests are widely recognized as important carbon sinks, which are ecosystems capable of capturing and storing large amounts of carbon dioxide. And while old-growth forests play an important role in storing carbon, younger regenerated forests typically pull more carbon from the atmosphere than these older forests. Eligible project types in the National Climate Solutions Grant Program for Round 2 include forest and woodland restoration, which I'll refer to as forest restoration, and urban forest canopy and water quality enhancement projects. Eligible for projects under the forest restoration category will establish or reestablish forest communities and improve carbon sequestration trajectories with resilient native vegetation. Such projects may occur in existing degraded forest or former agricultural fields or other deforested areas. For this grant program, a degraded forest is defined as a forest that has lost its capacity to provide important functions and values to people and nature. A forest restoration project must be a minimum of 1 acre in size and 120 feet wide, measured stem to stem from the outermost edge. Eligible projects under the Urban Forest Canopy and Water Quality Enhancement Project category will establish and maintain trees and reduce impervious cover and stormwater runoff while promoting groundwater recharge in urban areas. Urban land cover includes houses, buildings, pavements, and other areas that inhibit the infiltration of precipitation. For this grant program, urban land is defined as spaces subjected to non-forest uses that prevent normal tree regeneration and success, such as regular mowing, intensive grazing, or recreation activities. You can go to the next slide. So for forest restoration project applicants, there are several requirements specific to these types of projects. So these projects must submit detailed design documents for their proposed project, which include project preparation plans, planting plans, and tree protection plans. So some of this was Anthony reviewed in the general project requirements, and I'm going to provide a little bit more detail on those specific to the green carbon projects, and in this case right now, the forest restoration project requirements. So each of these required design documents are described, though, in this detail in the NOFA on pages 21 to 23. So detailed project preparation plans for the forest restoration project should outline the applicant's approach to vegetation control, compacted soils, and erosion control. Project preparation plans should include a map with the extent and orientation of the treatment area, a description of efforts to be undertaken, and be referenced in the project budget where appropriate. Specific project preparation action details and examples are listed on page 1 of the Notice of Funding Availability. So you can go to the next slide. Forest restoration project types must also provide a planting plan that identifies appropriate planting dates, handling methods to increase rates of survival, and restoration designs with planting lists. So typically, plantings have the most success when they are completed in the fall prior to frost or the early spring following thaw. So appropriate handling methods would include watering the trees before planting, keeping bare rootstocks moist and protected from the elements, and avoiding tree damage during transport or delivery, and applying proper planting methods on site. So planting plans must include a map showing planting and restoration areas, narrative describing the restoration plan, including handling methods, native tree species planting schedules, species, quantity, and size, and landscape restoration design plan, if applicable. More details provided in the NOFA, again, on page 22 and 23. Forest restoration project proposals must also include a tree protection plan, which describes how the applicant will take measures to prevent adverse impacts from pests, wildlife, livestock, and fire. Applicants must submit a tree protection plan that includes a map with the extent and orientation of treatment area. The tree protection plan can be an element of the design plan, just noting that. Description of the protective measures to be undertaken, including information on the specific materials, type, and designs of proposed fencing. And also note that if your proposal is utilizing deer exclosure as a type of tree protection, all deer exclosure fences must be at least 8 feet tall from the ground surface. Deer exclosure fencing must comply with the USDA NRCS 382 fence standards, and they must be maintained for at least 10 years following project approval and the initial work period to establish forest regeneration. More details provided on the NOFA on page 23. You go to the next slide. So in addition to these design documents, forest restoration project types must include a budget item for carbon sequestration evaluation. In round 2 of the NCS program, applicants are not required to evaluate the carbon sequestration potential of their proposal in the application. For NCS round 2, applicants must include in their project proposal budget the cost associated with performing in-house or hiring a consultant forester to complete carbon sequestration estimates following the method described in the NCS Notice of Funding Availability. So NJDEP strongly encourages applicants of the forest restoration project types to utilize a consulting forester due to the technical nature of this work. The NOFA includes a link to a list of consulting foresters for your reference. NCS Round 2 grantees will then be required to evaluate the carbon sequestration benefits of their project. This data will be utilized in NJDEP's public reporting. Grantees must complete the carbon sequestration estimates for their project proposal prior to planting and perform a subsequent evaluation if any changes to the project preparation plan or planting plan were initiated since the initial evaluation. This second estimate must be appended to the final report. And note, grantees will need to document that this work occurred within the work period of the grant agreement in order to receive reimbursement for the associated cost of hiring a consultant forester. Any work performed before the start of the grant work period is not eligible for reimbursement. Grantees that have already completed a full forest or stand inventory for their project site or sites are not eligible for reimbursement. However, grantees still must submit to the NJDEP the full forest or stand inventory in addition to other outputs of the bullets listed in the slide here, which are also in Appendix A of the Notice of Funding Availability prior to the start of any plantings for the project. You can go to the next slide. So, like forest restoration project types, applicants under the urban forest canopy and water quality enhancement project types are also required to submit detailed design documents for their proposed project, including, as applicable, project preparation plans, planting plans, and a tree protection plan. Project preparation plans for the urban forest project types will vary by site context and desired outcomes. So NJDEP has identified 3 common scenarios and their associated required preparation plan elements. Applicants should evaluate their site context and submit appropriate documentation. For example, if the site is a street tree planting scenario, submit preparation plan items listed under the street tree site preparation plan. If the project has a combination of these types of sites, for example, street trees and landscape, submit all applicable site preparation plan items. The Notice of Funding Availability, or the NOFA, outlines the project preparation requirements seen here on the slide for street tree sites, landscape area tree sites, and stormwater/green infrastructure tree sites on pages 25 and 26. Urban forest projects must meet the following requirements. They must follow the 10-20-30 rule. So this refers to the total urban tree population, including no more than 10% of one species, 20% of one genus, or 30% of any family. The 10-20-30 rule applies to the total existing and newly planted tree populations. So ideally, applicants should be evaluating their existing species compositions when making planting decisions in their grant proposal. Additionally, plantings should be ball and burlap or B&B trees. Urban forest canopy project types must also submit a planting plan that identifies appropriate planting dates, handling methods to increase rates of survival, and restoration designs with planting list. Typically, plantings have the most success if completed in the fall prior to frost or the early spring following thaw. Appropriate handling methods include watering the trees before planting, keeping bare root stocks moist and protected from the elements, and avoiding tree damage during transport or delivery, and applying proper planting methods on site. Tree protection plans are also required to be submitted for an urban forest canopy project in the NCS program application, and these should identify measures to protect trees during placement and after planting. Tree protection plans should include a description of staking, tree guards, and other protective measures to support newly planted trees, and a description of measures to ensure moisture retention and prevent weeds, such as the application of mulch and the utilization of tree irrigation bags. Next slide. In the round 2 of NCS program, applicants are not required to evaluate the carbon sequestration potential of their proposal in the application. For NCS round 2, applicants must include in their project proposal budget the costs associated with performing in-house or hiring a consultant forester to complete the carbon sequestration estimates following the method described in the NOFA. The NOFA includes a link to a list of consulting foresters if you choose to use a forester to complete this work. Applicants must budget for this activity twice, once prior to planting and once again when the project is completed. This is to account for any changes made during implementation. So the method is briefly described on the slide here, but is described in detail in Appendix A. It utilizes the iTree planting calculator for eProgram and looks at a lifetime of 30 years for a project. All of the required data that you need to input to iTree planting is listed in Appendix A. Grantees will be required to evaluate the carbon sequestration benefits of their project if and when they're selected to receive a grant. So this data will be utilized in DEP's public reporting. Grantees must complete the carbon sequestration estimates for their project proposal prior to planting and perform a subsequent evaluation if any changes to the project preparation plan or planting plan are initiated since the initial evaluation. So if completed, this second estimate must be appended to the final report. Note that grantees will need to document that this work occurred within the work period of the grant agreement in order to receive reimbursement for the associated costs, such as the cost of hiring a consultant forester. Any work performed before the start of the grant work period is not eligible for reimbursement. At the end of a forest restoration project in the NCS round 2, grantees are expected to achieve a 70% to 90% tree planting establishment, depending on the type of tree seedlings planted. At the end of a forest restoration project, total seedling survival for bare rootstock must be 70% or greater by the end of the contracted work period to receive full reimbursement. Total seedling survival for containerized stock must be 90% or greater by the end of the contract work period to receive full reimbursement. At the end of an urban forest tree canopy and water quality enhancement project, grantees are expected to achieve 90% tree establishment. Grantees are required to incorporate a 2-year plant survival requirement into their tree planting and maintenance contracts by requiring a maintenance bond. In the event that the grantee does not meet the 90% establishment requirement, documentation of tree maintenance and justification of why the threshold was not met must be provided. The final determination regarding the release of funds shall be within the department's discretion. So that wraps up this webinar's review of the project requirements for NCS round 2. And again, please review all of the requirements for the various project types in the NOFA. And so next I'm going to provide an overview of how to submit, to start and submit your application and project proposal in NJDEP Sage. So the application for NCS round 2 is in NJDEP Sage. This should go live later today after this webinar. But you are able to register in DEP Sage prior to the round 2 application going live. But all applications must be submitted through NJDEP Sage. Applicants must be registered in NJDEP Sage in order to submit an application. DEP Sage is separate from other Sage portals that are used for grant programs at other New Jersey state agencies. So if you're new to DEP Sage, please see our first-time Sage users quick reference guide, which is linked on the slide here. It's also uploaded on the NCS webpage under application materials. And I will say that this guide is also helpful for those who are not first-time users of DEP Sage, but maybe want a refresher or a quick overview of the major steps needed to complete an application and submit it in Sage. So once you register in DEP Sage, the applicant or you must provide basic information on the grantee, the project team, and their respective organizations. Once all members of your organization have been added into the forms page, you can start your application. So from the home page, and again, this is described in the Quick Start User Guide, from the home page, under the View Available Opportunities heading, you'll click on View Opportunities, and then using the drop-down box next to My Opportunities, select Natural Climate Solutions, NCS, and then click the filter button. Scroll down to the bottom of the grant opportunity information and click Apply Now. This is described in the First Time Users Guide, as I said. While completing the application forms in Sage, which I will walk through here in a moment on the next slides, you will need to also upload maps on specific pages that you'll generate using the NCS application support tool. And we are going to demo how to use that tool in the next section of the webinar. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so next slide. So this is a screenshot of what the pages look like in DEP Sage. This is the application information page. This is where you'll input information about your organization's members, as well as any information on partners. So the applicant is the lead organization that will serve as the grantee if selected for an award. As noted in the applicant eligibility section of the NOFA, while the grant application may include one or more partners to assist with specific tasks or funding, only the applicant will receive and execute the NCS grant. The applicant serves as the grantee and is accountable for ensuring all proposed work is completed as specified and all grant agreement requirements are met. The department will award grant funds solely to the grantee, who is then responsible for reimbursing any partners or subcontractors for documented and completed work. The department encourages applicants to work in partnerships to develop high quality and impactful NCS grant proposals. These partners, we refer to these as partners as I keep speaking here. So project partners listed on the applicant's proposal should be entities that have agreed to provide some form of measurable support to the project. This includes, but is not limited to, providing services, supplies, funds, or paid/volunteer labor. However, only the single applicant entity of a proposed project will be considered the grantee. Partners that are listed on the application will be treated as subcontractors by the department during the grant agreement and execution process. So on this form, when you're selecting a subcontractor or partner type in your Sage application, keep the following in mind. An in-kind match partner should be selected if a partner is only providing volunteer in-kind match services on the project. Cash match partner should be selected if a partner is only providing cash match funds to the project. And any partner that will be providing a combination of these types of matches and or will be performing other work on the project detailed in the budget should be listed as subcontractor. If you're unsure of what type of partner to select for a partner that is providing some form of assistance on the project, list them as subcontractor on this dropdown. So applicants must also submit information regarding the partner and subcontractors organization and contact information. You can refer to the project partners and subcontractor section of the NOFA for additional details on the requirements surrounding project partners and subcontractors that I outlined here. All grant partners and subcontractors known at the time of submitting the application must be listed in this section in the Sage application form. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, so in the Sage application, you will have an application snapshot once you've completed the basic first form and the project details form. This snapshot will overview the major pieces of information that you've inputted about your project, such as the project type, your organization type, the amount of the grant that you're requesting, and the total project amount, and any partners listed. At the top of this form, in order to begin or continue to work on the other forms of your application, you'll navigate to this Forms menu at the top and click on that. So you can go to the next slide, Jim. This Forms menu at the top here will show you a list of the project, the application forms for your project. And you'll see these will vary based on the selection of project types or type that you select on the project details page. So this is for a green hypothetical green carbon project. And you'll see the icon on the left-hand side of the Forms menu indicates the status of that form. So if there is a pen over a paper, it means that you have input information on the form and completed the form and there's no issues and it's able to be submitted. If it's blank, it means that the form is blank and you haven't input the required information yet. And if there is a little stop hand icon, it means that there are some issues on the form that are preventing the form from being completed. So you need to resolve those issues before you can submit or complete that form. So you can navigate to each form individually using this menu. You can also navigate through it by utilizing the next and save options at the top of the forms pages. So you can go to the next slide. So this is the example project details form. This is the first page after your applicant information form. This is where you'll select the project type that your project proposal is pursuing. You'll put in a name for your project and other information. Next slide. So if you were to select a blue carbon project type on the project details page, you can select a number of combination of project types, but if you do select a blue carbon project type, if you go to the next slide, Jen, you'll see that your forms menu has now changed. You've added a blue carbon baseline data submission form because this is a required information for blue carbon project types, but is not required for green carbon project types. So your forms menu will update. Next slide. The next application form, and this is standard for all project types, is the project location form. So this is where you'll select the county and or counties or municipality and or municipalities that your project proposal includes, and you'll indicate whether or not any or all of your project is located within the boundaries of a New Jersey overburden community. On this page, you will also input the project site address for each non-contiguous project site that's in your proposal. You may just have one project site, but if you have multiple planting site locations, you would input the best street address for those project sites and then provide a description or location of land ownership as described here and in the NOFA. If you click the box below, that will add another field for you to put in a new or additional project site address and description. So you can continue to do that for additional project sites that you need to provide information for. Next slide. The next form is the measurable outcomes form. So Anthony reviewed this earlier, but this is where you'd input that information. If you need to add additional rows to this form, you would follow the instructions here, which show that in order to add more rows, you fill out the measure fields completely and then push the plus button on the left-hand side here and then click Save at the top of the page. The page will refresh and will add an additional row for you to add an additional measurable outcome. If you conversely would like to delete a row from the contents of this table, you need to make sure that all of the row that is at the end of the table is empty, and then hit save, and it will remove the additional row that may have been added in error, for instance. So next slide. For Blue Carbon specific projects that have this Blue Carbon baseline data submission Sage form, this is where you'll upload what Jen was talking about, which is the map of your site with the marsh retreat combined classification shown, as well as the boundaries of your project site layered on top. And our NCS application support tool is what you'll use to generate this map, and we'll have a demo of that very soon. And then you'll put in all of your required baseline data that allows us to estimate the carbon sequestration potential of your project proposal if selected. If you have your own sequestration rates and densities that have been completed for the project area and you'd like to submit those, you can do so on this forms page as well, but this is not required for your project. Next slide. The next form in Sage is the project proposal form. So this is where you'll have a series of places where you upload your completed template for each individual requirement. So the proposal narrative, we have a link to the NCS proposal narrative template. This is also on our webpage, but it's linked in the Sage application form as well. You'll fill out the template, and then once you've filled it out completely, upload it here, and you'll submit all of the upload attachments that are required for your project proposal. Before you submit, ensure that you've submitted all of the additional files that you might want to add. So for some of these, you'll see you can add multiple files. You just need to click the plus icon, and that will allow you to submit another file. Note that you are required to provide a brief description of what the file you've uploaded is in the description box in order to submit. Next slide. The last forms page is the supplemental information form. Again, you'll have a series of locations where you can upload files to meet each of the individual requested requirements. The red stars indicate required fields. So if there's no red star, you're not required to upload a file, but you may choose to upload a file in those locations. Next slide. So that completes our review of the application submission process in DEP Sage. And I'm going to pass it over to Jen real quick to talk about the application review process briefly. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. That was a lot of material. Thank you for walking us through all of that in so much detail. So for the application review process, instead of a competitive ranking among all proposals, round 2 transitions to a minimum required score threshold. Projects must score a minimum of 75 points out of a total of 100 points to be considered for funding. The timing for announcements can vary significantly due to the rolling applications and the availability of funding. The DEP will inform applicants once funding is exhausted and will also keep the applications on file for future consideration if more funding becomes available. The department will use this scoring criteria to evaluate submitted proposals in the NCS grant program. This is discussed in greater detail in Appendix B of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. These categories include the project scope and likelihood for success, the organizational capacity, budget and cost effectiveness, the co-benefits of a project, and the impacts on overburdened communities. So next we're going to watch, there's a video clip here that we're providing. This is going to walk us through the new grant application support tool. All right, thank you, Ryan. So I see in the chat from some of our attendees that they were having some sound issues. So that video it did have sound. Sorry if you couldn't hear it, but we will be posting that tutorial on our website, so that will be available for you. And then I'm just going to hand it off to Ryan to just walk us through very briefly the sitemap and co-benefits report examples.
Yep,
Ryan?
thanks, Jen. Yep, these were just a couple examples of what those exported sitemaps and co-benefit reports could look like. These are just illustrative examples of that, but just to give you a feel and for the sense of, for the sake of the recording, showing what they may look like that could be uploaded alongside your applications.
Thank you, Brian. All right, and next I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Tony, who is going to walk us through all of the different templates that we have developed for this second round of funding. And again, these templates are linked on the SAGE portal directly, so ease of access, but also again on our website. So Tony, take it away.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Rowe. I'm also a research scientist here at NJDEP, Bureau of Climate Change and Clean Energy. I'll be going over the templates portion of the presentation for the NCS grant in round 2. Our team developed several templates that help our applicants develop and streamline the grant proposal process in all aspects from budgeting to programmatic details in the appropriate formats that complements our grant portal system called SAGE. First, I'm going to be talking about the NCS proposal narrative. This is a Microsoft Word template that the applicant can download, fill in all the appropriate grant proposal details to narrate your projects for our review. Please ensure you familiarize yourself with the application components. Please reference the NOFA and complete your project narrative to tell your project story towards carbon sequestration. The project narrative should include technical subject matter expertise, highlighting how your project can successfully achieve the project goals, showcase climate mitigation potential and their co-benefits, show any prior experience, well-defined and thought out with partnerships in place. It must be shovel-ready, demonstrate cost effectiveness and achievable within 3 years. And afterwards, when you have your, please upload your final application narrative in the SAGE portal. Next slide. Next, we developed a project timeline template in a Microsoft Excel format, one for each project category, blue or green carbon. 2 sheets to highlight in this template are the directions and the README and example sheets. Please review these sheets before crafting your timeline to get a good sense of how to fill these out. All timelines are forecasted to be 3 years, broken down into quarter weeks. Generally, your work falls within 4 major phases that we identified as core components, which are coordinating and planning, materials development, biologic deployment, and monitoring. That must be further itemized into specific tasks that you as a grantee need to identify and develop with your team. Simply fill in the appropriate cells with the appropriate color to identify when and who will be conducting the phases, tasks for each core component. Also, as a reminder, please identify your team and your partners by designating each with a unique color in the responsible party key section towards the top of the timeline. This should coincide with the cells that are filled in to identify your partners or the grantee and their tasks. Further details should be included in the timeline with an associated number towards the bottom of your sheet, for example, 1 or 2, and you can state those details at the bottom of the sheet. And lastly, insert specific key deliverables identified by a symbol, for example, an asterisk, 2 asterisks, or a pound sign in the timeline to indicate when and what is going to be accomplished. Once this is all completed, please upload the Microsoft Excel project timeline back into SAGE. Next slide. Budget. The budget is another Microsoft Excel workbook that contains several itemized and summarized sheets to create and calculate your project budget. In total, there are 8 sheets, 7 of which that you have to work through. To review and input your data, all the forecasted to capture costs incurred for 3 years. It's a very important point. Please review the README section, as this provides more guidance on how to fill the budget sheets out properly, and most importantly, read the NOFA in terms of what is eligible for funding. I'll provide a high-level overview of each sheet. First, the personnel costs. This sheet must be filled out accordingly to show and calculate your personnel, your staff, or your team itemized personnel costs broken down for your project to include staff profiles, fringe rates, adjusted salary. For example, if somebody has a salary that's $65,123.59, we kindly ask that you adjust that to something like $65,123.60 or $65,124, just round it off. We also want to see their full-time employee status percent, FTE, full-time employee. An example of that would be if 100% of that employee is devoted to the project, you will put in 100%. And you would do this for each year in 3 years. This sheet should auto-calculate all your figures. And one thing to also note, there's a drop-down menu in the task description. So please select the best option for that staff performing the task. The second sheet is the subcontractor or consultants. So if you're planning to use and pay for contractual services or consultants, you must fill this sheet out. Please identify the name of the contractor or sub-consultant. Select the type of services from the drop-down menu in that particular column. Briefly describe the work. Also, describe the final deliverable from the service and the amount, which can be a lump sum amount per year. You should forecast these services for 3 years, and the sheet will auto-calculate these figures in your behalf. Next is the supplies and equipment / other. These are the sheets to itemize all your supplies, your equipment, and other type of resources that you need for your project. Other types may include permitting costs for a blue carbon or a green carbon project. Please state this in the equipment category, but label it as permit to give it more of a distinction. Keep in mind, NOFA reinstates that equipment supplies that are greater than or equal to $10,000 per unit cost is not eligible. Fourth, we have our volunteer and in-kind match. This is optional, but it is required if it's a private entity, just to note that. So volunteer services are great resources to build community support, awareness, and to support your project's implementation. In this section, please identify your volunteers with your name, provide a description of that work, the hourly rate, which we provided in the NOFA. There's a hyperlink there that verifies that the current rate that New Jersey accepts. Also, don't forget to input your quantity for your volunteers and do so for 3 years. There's also, just as a safeguard, there's a column on the volunteer rate link. You should also input the volunteer rate hyperlink for each volunteer group so that DEP could confirm with the NOFA and check the auto calculations that you derived for our review. Important to note, do not put any other type of in-kind match sources in this sheet if it's not an unpaid volunteer organization or individual. We view, or DEP views, other match sources as cash match instead of income, which I'll discuss later on. Next, we have travel. Travel reimbursed expenses should be itemized here in accordance with the NOFA. allowed mileage rates along with the project duration. Travel costs should reflect only costs incurred for the project implementation, such as you have a staff member who needs to drive from their normal workstation to the project site to do their assignments. If you're using contractors or consultants, and they have travel costs directly related to the project implementation, this amount can be lumped in and placed in the subcontractor or consultant sheet that I described prior. However, it can be itemized here, but please distinguish it as if it's contractor or staff in the travel expense category and justifications for our awareness. Next, we have the cash match. So like I said before, circling back to shedding more light on this topic from the in-kind match, we refer to all match that is not volunteer-based as cash match. Due to this, cash match can flow from your sources, such as from staff, contractors, supplies and equipment, travel, permits that the grantee will contribute towards the project apart from being funded from the Natural Climate Solutions grant. So in this sheet, you'll input these sources in the same format or the way that you've drafted them towards grant funding. Last, we have the budget summary sheet. This is your final budget sheet that must be filled out that summarizes all your expenses, match, and it shows your total grant amount along with your total project, which can be the grant amount along with your match sources. That's the distinction there. You should carefully review each of your final amounts for each itemized sheet that you've been developing prior to this and place the correct amounts in the appropriate column, such as the expense category and rows. If you're proposing to include direct costs on top of your project expenses to be paid by the grant, the NOFA caps this rate to be up to 15% of your total modified direct costs. So please review the calculation guidelines and the equation to accurately calculate your modified direct costs into this section. Just to reiterate that, it is taking all your salary, fringe, equipment that's less than $10,000, materials, supplies, travel, and other services like permitting or permits, and the first $25 of each subcontract amount. So in summary, modified total direct costs are your direct costs minus ineligible expenses. Indirect costs is taking the indirect rate, which is up to 15%, times your total modified direct costs to calculate your total indirect costs. Once all that is finalized, please upload the final budget Excel file in Sage. Next. So drafting your monitoring plan. I'll be going over the adaptive management monitoring template, and we shortened that, we labeled it as the draft monitoring plan. Please review the template's instructions, goals, and the template table, which you need to provide with your proposal in Sage. Just to clarify, this serves as your draft version of the adaptive monitoring plan, and the expectation is, if awarded, DEP will need your final monitoring plan prior to grant agreement. Nonetheless, it's better to try and provide your best plans forward to showcase how you proactively monitor and evaluate your project's trajectory. So whether your project is blue or green carbon type, all monitoring plans must factor in to identify and provide technical responses with actions towards 9 metric categories. These are, first, goal, which is your desired outcomes. Second, objective, which we define it as certain actions to reach your goal. Third, indicator or metric. These are just your parameters in terms of data collection. Methods are activities to collect the data. 5, spatial and temporal resolution. This is your project scale, time frame within each metric of data collection, for example, grid surveys, plots, etc. Your restoration target / range. Appropriate numeric, this is your appropriate numeric target of measurement. Trying to quantify things here. 7, adaptive management threshold. This is a specific value that will set off an adaptive management response. 8, triggered adaptive management activity. These are activities that will take place when the adaptive management threshold is reached. 9, reassessment window. This is the time frame to reevaluate adaptive management results and take further actions if necessary. So please review the examples we provided in this template that will help you develop this plan. Feel these examples can be are real scenarios in both blue and green project types under each category based off previous rounds from the round 1 and other restoration projects that have that we are aware of. So please save your work, upload your final draft adaptive management plan or draft monitoring plan into Sage. Next. Your maintenance plan. So last but not least, your maintenance plan. Just to be clear, your finalized maintenance plan is due within 18 months of the start of the work period, as Anthony mentioned earlier on. So this serves basically as your draft maintenance plan, but just like the other plan, we do need your best final draft maintenance plan for your proposal. So we would like for you to think of this plan as such. You've designed your plan, or you designed your project, built it out, you're monitoring it, monitored it, made appropriate adjustments using adaptive management strategies, and you're headed towards completion. Now we need to maintain and steward all these investments that were made for a climate resilient future during and beyond the timeframe of your grant. So please review this template's instructions, the guidelines mentioned in it's an MS Microsoft Excel template under README. Please for further guidance. The examples we provide can help you fill out this Excel template to include your project information, data reporting, personnel details that are tasked with this, project overview that talks about the maintenance plan design, site and location information, list of maintenance tasks, estimated schedule of events, list of disposal sites for trash and debris, and maintenance log that record maintenance log record sheets for all these events. So please upload your final maintenance plan in Sage as well. And I'm going to turn it back to Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. All right, so now we are ready to do the Q&A session. So the recording is going to be, we're going to stop the recording now, and